Okay, this is April 14th, 1996. My name is Joe Todd. Give me your full name.
Paul Lynn Schoofield.
Mr. Schoofield, where are you from?
I'm from Locust Grove, Oklahoma.
Were you born there?
No, I was born in Oklahoma City.
Okay, what's your date of birth?
10/25/57.
57. Now you're in the Army Reserve, correct?
Correct.
What rank?
E7.
E7, which is?
Sergeant first class.
Sergeant first class. Okay. This interview mainly is about Desert Storm, but were you active duty in the Army?
I had some active duty back in the middle of the late 70s.
Okay. When did you first join the Army?
July of 75.
Okay. And went to basic where?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
What's your fondest memory of basic? Okay. Your memories of basic.
Memories of basic, say probably friendship. First time away from home. Being 17 years old and getting out into the world, is to say. I guess the actual fondest memory of basic would probably be some of the troop movements, marches. I seemed to always enjoy that. A lot of guys didn't, but I
did. And you trained to be what in the Army?
It would have been a Persian missile crewman, which is a system that's out of date now. It's gone from inventory.
And that job skill number is what?
It would have been a 15 Echo 10, I think is what it would have been.
Okay.
Something like that.
And you left basic when?
Left basic in September of 75. Went on a brief leave for 10 days. Then I reported to Fort Sill at about the end of September for advanced training. Went to my advanced training, completed it.
So what is your advanced training? What is that? What does that consist of?
That would have been the Persian missile school that I was discussing earlier.
Now what did you learn to do at Fort Sill with the Persian missiles?
To be a crewman on a Persian missile launching system.
And your duties would be?
Well, there's really a multitude of duties, but it's cable humping, that type of thing, round assembly. What I was getting ready to say is that here I trained for Persian missiles, but there was a new unit that was forming on Fort Sill at the time that was a Lance missile unit, which is a smaller missile. It was a 6th Battalion, 33rd Field Artillery, and instead of putting me with a Persian unit, they put me with this new Lance unit. Some of the skills are similar. So they OJT'd me as a 15 Delta 10, which had been a Lance missile crewman. And I spent, just about my entire enlistment there. I was in the 6th Battalion, 33rd Field Artillery for 2.5 years altogether, and I ETS'd with them.
How does the Persian compare to the Lance?
Pershing is a long, it's really classified as an intermediate range missile. It's a 2-stage missile. Has a max range unclassified of, I believe, 1,500 miles, whereas the Lance missile had an unclassified range of about 70 miles. Pershing was strictly nuclear. The Lance was conventional or nuclear.
And you ETS'd when?
July 14th of 78.
And that's the time you left the Army?
Yes.
Okay. What'd you do then?
Went back to civilian life. Farm labored for a while. Worked in Oklahoma City. I'm kind of a jack of all trades and master in none. I did a lot of different things. Went to school some. Got into raising hogs for a time.
In Oklahoma City?
Well, no, it was around where I was back up. I told you a while ago I was born in Oklahoma City, but we moved from Oklahoma City when I was about 13 or 14 years old to a town called Tuttle. Tuttle's down south and west of Oklahoma City, about 20, 25 miles on the south side of the South Canadian River. Anyway, after I got out of the Army, I came back to the Tuttle area, worked around Tuttle, worked in Oklahoma City. Let me think. Ended up working for Brahms Dairy, which is Brahms ice cream stores. They have a dairy out there. I went to work for them in '79, and worked from then until '81, and left there and held some other odds and ends types of jobs. Worked for myself for a while, and finally went to work for the USDA Soil Conservation Service in 1983. In fact, it was in April of '83. After I joined, or after I went to work for the Soil Conservation Service, I noticed that there was a reserve unit there in Bartlesville, which I promptly began to get back in the Army Reserve. Succeeded. I believe I started with them in September of '83.
What kind of unit?
It's a light equipment maintenance company it was at that time.
You say light equipment maintenance, what does that mean?
Light equipment maintenance is ground power components like generators, the gas-powered laundry units that we see so much of, refrigeration units. Let's say a unit was broken into ground power, and it had an optics section which worked on night vision goggles and that sort of thing, a radar section. That's classified in the Army as being light equipment. Some of it's not very light, but that's the way they class it. And that's what we were when we deployed to Desert Storms, a light equipment maintenance.
Were you with the Bartlesville unit when you went to Desert?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
When were you notified? Or let me back up before we get into that. The Iran-Iraq War. What do you think about that?
To be honest with you, when this whole thing came up, we were in Sacramento, California, at the Sacramento Army Depot, which is now closed, for budget cuts. We were training. I hadn't heard anything about Kuwait and Iraq.
No, this is Iran-Iraq.
Iran-Iraq.
The eight-year war.
Okay. I was thinking 1990. What was the question again?
The Iran-Iraq war, for 8 years when Iran took our embassy and all that, and they had the big war. What were you thinking that time period?
What was I thinking? Well, I knew that Iraq at that time was an ally, or considered maybe that's, to me, maybe they were kind of on good terms with the United States. I don't think they were classified as per se as an ally. But I knew that the United States was backing Saddam Hussein against Iran.
Now, didn't they do away with their arms embargo against Iraq at that time period? If I'm not mistaken. Didn't we sell arms to Iraq in that war?
I'm not really sure. My memory is kind of vague in that, but they sure didn't have very much U.S. equipment. But I know that we were supporting. It may have been more, what's the word? Diplomatic type of support. Who knows?
Now, in the Bartlesville unit, what is your capstone? Your capstone to, or your overseas mission? Where did you go?
Okay, our capstone. This has changed since then. Our capstone is entirely different nationally from an ARCOM. The way they work. Our capstone was such that we knew this. We would be assigned to it was the 731st Maintenance Battalion, which fell under what was that first ASG that fell under? It was don't hold me to this, it was something like the 236th ASG. It fell under them first, and then it went to the 2nd ASG.
And that's where?
You know, that was the ASG headquarters are both in the same place, which has been in King Khalid. Or I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. The 2nd ASG, I believe, was from St. Louis, and that was a 226th Air Support Group. Where they were from, I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
But our maintenance battalion was from Alabama, I think.
Let's go ahead and continue when you were in Sacramento. Without going now. Go ahead.
And we were in Sacramento.
Now, what's the time period?
This would have been August '93.
Okay.
It was before the invasion.
No, August of '93.
Or not just August '93. August of 1990. Just
Okay.
right, you know. In fact, the invasion occurred while we were there.
Now, you're in the Bartlesville unit in Sacramento.
Yes, we were in Sacramento for annual training
Okay.
at that time. That's what was odd about the whole thing. You know, when you get away from home, you don't get to watch the world news every night. You know, you're doing different things, you're busy. And this came as a total surprise to us. The command didn't really say much about it at the time when we were out there. But when we got back to home station, before they dismissed us, there'd been some communiques that came from the battalion that was notifying us that we were possibly soon to be activated, you know, at this time. Again, I can't stress the point that it was such a total surprise to everyone, because I hadn't, I watched the world news, you know, I tend to pay attention to world affairs, and this thing seemed to come from nowhere. It was very sudden.
When you first heard of the Iraqi invasion, what did you think?
I thought it was probably a small action that really didn't probably amount to a whole lot. I was surprised when I later heard the numbers, you know, that actually came across the border. But, I don't really know what else I could say about it other than I didn't really think it would stem into what it did. You know,
Where were you when you got word that you were being activated?
Okay, I was at work. This, I wanted to back up a little bit. Under our capstone, we were assigned to the 7.
Okay, now explain the word capstone.
Capstone, what acronym that is, I don't, I've had it explained to me before, but as we know, there's so many acronyms, I lose count. But the capstone is the structure for deployment. If the, you know, when the balloon goes up. Okay, this is going to be who you're going to be going with, depending on how large of a deployment it is. But question again, or where was we heading with this?
Where were you when you got the word you're being activated?
Okay, the actual word came in December. It was December the 6th. I was at work. It was I'd just gotten to work, in fact, at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the phone rang, and it was my first sergeant. You know, and he told me, "Paul, it's me." He did use my first name, which is kind of unusual for him. We finally got the word, you know, and this word had been expected for ever since August. We thought from one drill to the next, from August all the way up to this time, that, hey, you know, we'd get ready to leave, they'd tell us, you know, be ready, you know, because our battalion's already gone and we're getting ready to go. What actually prevented us from going had something to do with the way our unit was classified in the capstone, what they thought we were and what we actually were. They had to get this worked out. That's, to make a long story short, they did, and then we were activated in December. And after we were there, our battalion, that's one of the first questions they had for us is, where have you guys been? You know, we were over here in August, and you know, and here you are just showing up.
What was the reaction of your boss, your employees?
A lot of them really didn't think that I would ever go, because I was in a maintenance unit. they thought that a lot of combat units would go first, which if you study logistics, that's not really correct, because you have to have a lot of logistical support in place to support large combat force.
And you work where?
I worked for the USDA Soil Conservation Service. Did then, still do.
Where? Where's your?
In Pryor, Oklahoma.
Okay. Okay. So you got the word you're being activated.
Mm-hmm.
What happened?
They told us to report on December the 9th, the unit. I got my affairs in order there at home. Rather chaotic time, it's almost like you're in a dream. It's the best way I can describe it. They give us those 3 days to get our things in order and report the unit. We reported on the 9th of December. We spent 3 days there in Bartlesville, kind of in a lockdown state. They did a lot of administrative records, wills, powers of attorney. They started they'd actually done that before, but they kind of finished up on it. They got ID cards for our spouses and children. Got into got our families involved in the family group support, this sort of thing, which was necessary. We left Bartlesville on the 12th and went from there to Fort Sill, where we were, after we got to Fort Sill, we got back to your basic combat skills training, stay alive type training. They stressed that more than they did anything. They assumed they already knew how to do our jobs. They weren't, they took pretty good care of us. They prepared us, they outfitted us extremely well. We didn't lack for anything.
Okay, what was your wife's reaction?
I think she expected it. I think she felt it somewhere or another. She's a good woman, a strong woman, and she did just fine.
What's her name?
Bria.
Okay. So from Bartlesville, where'd you go?
Bartlesville, we went to Fort Sill.
How'd you travel?
By bus. We just went down on bus, which it's about a 4.5 hour bus ride right at it. They had a sign, I never will forget this, I'd almost forgotten. They had a sign there at the main gate there at Fort Sill that said, "Welcome 304th." We all thought that was kind of strange. But
what was the reaction of the guys in the bus with you? What were you thinking, talking about?
The unknown. Really, there really wasn't that much talking going on. You'd hear things like you'd hear people trying to support one another. It's a normal type of thing. You'd hear some people talk about the change that this is going to cause. And it is quite a shock. You go from reserve status and civilian job to being pulled up by your bootlaces and going on to something that you didn't know what the end result was going to be. To me, that's what I thought about, was the unknown. I don't really know what else to really say.
Okay.
But
Of course, there was word that Saddam was going to use chemicals.
that, with what information I'd heard, I had limited access to some classified things. I knew what he, not what all he had on hand, but I knew what types of assets he had. I was very concerned because there were some elements, in particular with cyanide, that he had that our equipment is useless against. It will take your life.
Ever thought about being killed?
Yeah. In fact, I talked to my wife about that. That's just something you got to do. Oh yes, yeah, I thought about being killed. I wasn't. Not that I'm a brave person, because I'm not. But I was supported by my family, by my wife, and I just kind of put that in our Maker's hands. If I die, then I die. If I come home, I come home.
So, you out at Fort Sill.
Mm-hmm.
What you do?
Hey, we got to Fort Sill. The first thing we did was get everything on rails that we owned. That went on for a week, right at it. It's quite a process preparing things for deployment. We had to paint everything. We had to secure everything for travel on the ships, which means in a maintenance unit that's very difficult, because you've got thousands of small components, tools, nuts and bolts. You couldn't have any of this rattling around. It all had to be secured. You had to go inside a lot of the maintenance trailers and shore them up with lumber to where nothing could move on the inside. Because we were told that this would unstabilize, or too many things in a boat that's moving around get unstabilized. It can change the way the boat rides. So this was the hardest part, really. I think it was good though, because it took everybody's mind off of it, because we had a lot to do.
How long did that take?
That took a week. Of course, this was in December. It was very cold, but it had to be done, so we did it. And then after that week, we started our combat skills training. Just waiting on the word. We also had to wait. We got upgraded to a I forget what how they we got as high as what is the word? It's a numbered code that they give you for receiving materials, because you're getting ready to deploy. I don't know that much about that.
Is it FAD?
Yes, that's it. We got up to FAD 2. Once we got to FAD 2, and it took us about 2 weeks to get there. Once we got to FAD 2, we started getting everything that we got, equipment we didn't even know we would even have. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of things. We got more or less an open checkbook. We purchased anything that we thought we would need, within federal guidelines. But for instance, ice boxes, we were able to take ice boxes for medical reasons, and we took a washer and a dryer. I think it was 2 washers and dryers that we took. A lot of additional toilet paper and comfort type items. One other thing I might mention is we had a lot of things that were donated to us from the city of Bartlesville and the city of Norman. Soda pop, we had a crate. That crate was probably 6 by 6. It was full of soda pop that they gave us. People were very generous.
Did the town of Bartlesville see you all?
Yes.
What they do there?
The news stations were there. There was a lot of people there. It was really quite an affair. I mean, it was, a very moving thing. They got the unit out in front of the drill facility, out in front of the flagpole, and they went through the order of arms for bringing the flag down and stowing it. Or not stowing it, you actually take your flag with you, but they went through all that. And that was immediately after this, we got on the bus and left.
Let me ask this a specific question. Your NBC training, how did it change from before Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then while you're mobilized? How did your chemical training change?
You mean the intent of people, the way that people took it? They took it extremely serious, because they knew their lives could count on it. I think a lot of people, it depends on how how serious we take life and responsibilities. Some people take it more seriously than others, you know, even when there's not a war going on. But everybody took it seriously from that point.
Now, your chemical training consisted of what?
Everything in CTT, plus a lot of other things. Common task training. We went through that and we were blue in the face.
Now, what is your chemical gear? What does that consist of?
That's your mop gear, the suit that you wear, the boots, the gloves, and of course your M17 mask. They completely, there's a mask section there at Fort Sill that went through everybody's mask, make sure it's in proper operating order, put the combat filters in it, check the hoods. I mean, well, in fact, we all got brand new hoods.
How'd your attitude change toward chemical training?
I always kind of took it, well, I mean, I didn't dwell on it, but I took it kind of seriously because I wanted to know how to, well, being an NCO, I had to know how to use it because I had to train my troops how to do it. I've always stressed its importance, you know, all of your combat skills, because they're often neglected.
Did you have any cultural briefings on Iraq or Kuwait?
Yes.
Arabia?
Yes, they provided us there was a pamphlet, I wish I still had it, a pamphlet about the country, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They explained some of the basic customs, the land mass, indigenous wildlife, things to kind of watch for. We got some cultural, we got more, let me think, most of the cultural was word of mouth, but we were talked to about some of the things that you don't do there.
What did they tell you?
That we're ambassadors of our country. A soldier is an ambassador of their country, and it's each individual's responsibility to represent his country, and you know, to adhere to the guidelines that the general guidelines, and then whatever your command requires you to do, depending on where you're at. If you're out in the middle of the desert, obviously you're not going to have much contact. But if you're in close to a town, you know, there's certain things that.
What they tell you not to do?
They told us some things that would insult an Arab. I never would have thought of. One thing that I thought was rather strange was showing your feet to an Arab. That's an insult to an Arab if you show them the bottoms of your feet. You know, it means that if you show him the bottoms of your feet, you're telling him that you're above him. That's what that means. See, what's some other things? Not touching, you know, not even brushing their women. You know, the women in Saudi Arabia are really a property in essence, but just generally respecting this culture that you're going to, you know, just conduct ourselves properly. They told us that we had to be sure and protect the wax that we had for some places that we would be around some of the Saudi military installations.
The wax with female soldiers?
Yes. The women soldiers were directed not to remove their outer garment. You know, they couldn't go on their t-shirts. You know, they had to keep their garments on. There was really more put upon women than really what the men had to put up with.
So let's go back to Fort Sill. You have the train loaded. What'd you do?
Okay, the train, when the train left, there was two individuals that went with it. They had to go with it to the port, get it on the ship, get it on the ships. It was actually, the equipment actually came over on 3 different boats. Then the port that the equipment went to, there was some kind of a problem, and I can't recall what it was. The first port that the train went to was so crowded that they had to take it to another port to get the stuff out of the country because it was just bottlenecked. I want to say that our equipment went out of Houston, I thought, but I can't be positive about that.
You know what kind of ships they were on?
They were just freighters. I only actually saw one of the ships. I was on the advance party, so the first ship had enough vehicles and equipment on it for us to set up the initial camp. So, you know, after this stuff was taken off the boat, we left within a day or two. We were heading. That's where we need to be.
And what's the advance party?
The advance party was 40 men. They went up to set up camp, you know, in the desert. It was just nothing, just a patch of sand.
Okay. So how did you travel to Arabia?
Or how do we actually get there?
The advance party.
Oh, okay. That's, let me think.
Now you're at Fort Sill.
Okay, we're at Fort Sill. They bussed us to Altus. They put us on 3 different chalks from Altus.
What's the chalk?
Chalks is a military air flight. I was on the first chalk, which was loaded almost entirely with cargo, and I was chalk commander of that chalk, and I had 7 men with me. The rest of the unit came over on 2 other flights, but you know, ours was the, wait a minute, ours was the second chalk. Yeah, ours was the second chalk because the first chalk broke down in Germany, and they were detained, and we got there about 10 hours before they did.
What kind of airplane?
It was a C-141.
C-141. So you flew from Altus to where?
Yeah, we flew from Altus to base, and see, where is it base on the East Coast? I believe it was South Carolina. That's kind of foggy because it was, to me, I say South Carolina, I can't really be sure. Somewhere on the East Coast.
You know, when I'm familiar with Dover, Dover, Delaware, and maybe one South Carolina.
We were only there for perhaps an hour. Then they loaded us up, and we landed in Rhine, Maine, which is, you know, I was really impressed in how.
Germany.
Yes. The strange thing about the flight, we leave Altus about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We land on the East Coast. We stay there an hour and a half, maybe a little longer because it was dark when we left there. Of course, that time of year, you know, it gets dark quickly. We left the United States, you know, heading to Germany, and that was something like a 8 or 9 hour flight, something like that. We landed in Germany. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And here we are, all ready to eat breakfast. And they had fried chicken and some other stuff in there for us to eat. We were there. In fact, they came to the mess hall to get us. We were in there eating. They thought we'd be there an hour and a half, but we weren't. They called the mess hall, loaded us up with food. I mean, there wasn't any problem being taken care of. They fed us, and then they gave us 2 box lunches each. We got on the airplane. And
what's the attitude of the people in Germany, the Americans at the air base, with you all?
Very good. The Americans, the personnel, we were treated extremely well in Germany. In fact, everywhere we went, we were well taken care of. I can't complain about anything other than having to go.
What are you thinking about flying over there? Did your thoughts change on anything, or?
I thought about where I was going. At that point in time, you know you're going. You got, you know, your family's still with you, but you're not really thinking about family as much as you are where you're going and what you're going to have to do.
So you left Germany.
We left Germany. I forget how long that flight was from Germany, and we landed in King Fahd Air Base, Saudi Arabia.
What part of Arabia is
It is north and west of Dhahran, or the ports. It's about 50 miles northwest of Dhahran and Daman and all those ports there. Out in the middle of nowhere. It was 2 o'clock in the morning there, which, you lose all track of time. Dark. They let us off the plane. They welcomed us to the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, you know, and threw the door open. First thing I noticed was the smell of the air. You know, it smelled bad, but you know, this is a little different smell to it. It was dry is what it was. You know, real dry air. We had 2 duffel bags full of gear and a basic load. We had our basic loads with us and weapons. We got off the plane. We had to walk something like, gosh, it seemed like a mile. It was probably more like about half a mile to a trailer that they had set up on the edge of the runway. We stayed in there for probably about 30 minutes or so, and then here come our Saudi advance party, which I didn't really tell you much about them. They left about a week before the main body did, and there was about 7 men in that. They showed up, gathered us up, and took us to Khobar Towers, where we had a building there. Stayed in Khobar Towers 2 weeks.
What are Khobar Towers?
Khobar Towers are on the south side of Dhahran. The only thing I can tell you is that downtown Dhahran is just kind of straight north.
Khobar Towers.
What Khobar Towers was some high rises. They were from anywhere from 6 stories high to, I don't know, 11, maybe 12 stories high. This was a facility that King Fahd built for the Bedouin tribesmen. More or less the type of deal it was. Friends come live with me and be my subject. They chose not to, so these were vacant structures.
Were they modern?
Yes, they were. In fact, they were nice structures.
So you had indoor plumbing, running water?
Oh yes. We had it made. You can burn a lot of units. These guys that went over there the week ahead did some hustling. We had some Vietnam vets in that bunch, and they didn't let anybody tell them no, and they managed to get in that facility and secure us a building, which we actually had. We had part of that building for the whole time we were there, and we used it as a recreation, you know, rest area. We only had 1 suite, whereas when we arrived there, we had an entire building. But you know, we had a presence there in that building the whole time.
When did you have your first contact with the Arabian people?
There at Daman, a bus driver in particular, was our first trip down the port. The first ship that came in. In fact, I was kind of given charge of him for some reason. You know, he couldn't really speak that much English. And they told me, you just stay with this bird and make sure he doesn't go anywhere, you know, or doesn't leave. He was a nice fella.
What was his job?
He was a bus driver.
Just assigned to your unit or what?
That's kind of the way it was. And the transportation, just about all a lot of the transportation needs was provided by King Fahd. This is one of the things that he did for us, you know, for our country.
And the bus was used for what?
Just transporting troops wherever they needed to go. And this guy was kind of like a taxi driver. He stayed with us however long we needed him. They had that was kind of unusual because there was foreign nationals primarily that did these things, or that took care of most of the transport. But the drivers, the actual bus drivers that were taking care of Army personnel were Saudi Arabians, which was kind of different, kind of surprised me.
What was their attitude toward the Americans?
They were glad we were there.
What was your attitude toward them?
Oh, really more indifference. I myself, in my own heart, felt that I was glad personally that we were there to try to help them.
Did you have any contact with any other Arabians at that time?
Not so much there. just kind of brief encounters, but we weren't really allowed out of the Cobar Towers, and it was restricted, you know, at the time. And there was guard mounts all the way around it, pillboxes. The only Arabs that came in there were probably, and that's one reason why this fellow was a Saudi, is he was somebody that was trusted, you know, by the local government.
What about your food there at Cobar Towers?
It was great. I expected a lot worse personally. A lot of guys complained about it, and I've eaten a lot worse.
What'd you have? What did the meals consist of?
Breakfast was powdered eggs. We had bacon, sausage, toast, pancakes some mornings, potatoes, fruit. We had everything we ever wanted.
And how long were you at Cobar Towers?
We were there 2 weeks, or it's about 2 weeks.
And what did you do those 2 weeks?
Continue to train. Once the boat arrived, we were working at the port, and it seems to me that after about 3 or 4 days, the first ship showed up. So what more or less had occurred was not only the ships we had, I'd forgotten about this, we had some air pallets. We had a warehouse not far from it was about a mile from the port that we had these pallets stored in. We had people guarding those. People that weren't guarding were either at the port or training back at Cobar Towers in the building itself. Just a continuation of CTT.
So, from Cobar Towers, where'd you go?
After that 2-week period, we talked about the advanced party before. I was one of the people that had been placed on advanced party, and one reason why I was is I'd worked for a colonel, a regular Army colonel. I was loaned to him for about 3 or 4 days to help him run special needs for combat equipment. It was coming in on C5s, like tank engines and this type of thing, from King Fahd to King Khalid, which is the Saudi military reservation.
How far?
That's about 400 miles, I believe. Or it seems that far to me. It seemed like it was a little more than 400 miles. But I'd traveled that road once with him, so that qualified me to guide them out to Hafr al-Batn. So that, and well, I'd have went with them anyway.
How'd you travel?
It was by, let me think. We had just about all the advanced party, if I recollect, were on vehicles, because we had a lot of vehicles. There was only 40 of us. But I believe just about everybody traveled on
When you
vehicles.
say vehicles, what kind of vehicle?
Or some of our equipment that arrived on boats, deuce and a halves, 5 tons, Chevy Blazers, the M109s and 8s.
Have a Humvee?
No, we didn't have any Humvees at that time.
So, from Cobar Tower, did you go to King Khalid?
No,
Or to Hafr al-Batn?
that was our second place that we set up. The first place we set up was established, it had already been established as Log Base Echo, which was west of Hafr al-Batn, about 23 miles. We were right off of MSR Blue. In fact, you come off Pipeline Road, you turned on the MSR Blue, you went about a quarter of a mile, and you turned back east.
Now, what is the MSR Blue?
That's let's see what the acronym for. It's Military Service Road, is it what they classify an MSR, something like that. Just a military road. But it's all these words, just dirt roads that the engineers have pushed, kind of packed a little bit.
So, you traveled to Hafr al-Batn?
Yeah, we traveled to Hafr al-Batn.
Now, what's the time period?
It took us, let's see, we left late. Our convoy left about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I remember we got chewed out horrendously from the CO, which he wasn't going to come out until later, because we weren't on our departure time. You know how that is. You have to depart. Okay, you know, if you're convoying, you got to leave at this time, and you'll arrive at such and such. We stopped. We left about 2, 3 o'clock, seemed like in the afternoon, and we stopped at the convoy service support area. It seemed like it was about 11 o'clock at night, and we slept for 4 or 5 hours, and we got up and drove the rest of the distance the next day. The convoy service support centers were well manned, by the way. They had, you know, the ones I went through, there was plenty of fuel, food. They even had tents set up that people could stretch out in, or they had cots in the tents where you could rest if you wanted to.
What were you thinking this time? You're heading, you know, you're getting close to the Iraqi border now. What are you thinking?
Well, I knew that we would be, I was kind of concerned from understanding where maintenance companies fit into logistics. You know, we were GS level maintenance, echelon above core, but that's way up the totem pole in maintenance. I mean, that's the highest it went. If it, you know, went any higher, it'd come back to States. To me, in the scheme of things, I'd visualized us being about 150 miles south of the other berms, and you know, here we were set up about 40 clicks, I believe it was, between 40 or less clicks from the berms. I thought about that, and I thought, well, either one of two things: we either have fools in command, or we got some awful good soldiers, which we had awful good soldiers. I knew we did. You know, I trusted, you know, when I thought about it, I trusted it, because they wouldn't have put all these assets here if they thought there was any way they was going to lose them. Which it turned out to be absolutely correct. The way they placed everything is it saved a lot of time moving supplies.
Scuds.
Yeah, we saw several of them. They're in Daharan before we left. As far as a fear of them, to me, you had more chance of being hit by lightning than you did by one of those. I remember once that a friend and I, we were walking to the PX, and they sounded one of those alarms. Here comes these young guys running by. You know, I turned to my buddy and I asked him, I said, where do you think they're running to? You know, and he's just liable to hit over there as it is here, you know, where we are. So I didn't really worry about Scuds at all personally, because it didn't look like to me it's very likely to get hit by one. You'd just be lucky or unlucky if you got hit by one. We did have one that shot down where we were, and that was the first night. In fact, this has been the same night the Scud killed those people there in Daharan. There was a big barrage of those things, and they never did report those. But there was Scuds in the sky that night. Something like, seemed like I heard reports of something like 11 or 12. They shot one of those things down just right over us. I was already asleep. There's some guys that were still sitting up there watching the airplanes. You know, they'd come in, and then they'd be way up there. They'd come in and then drop their lights. You know, when they were going into the run, they turned their lights off where they made their bomb runs. They was out there watching them. This thing came, and there was a Patriot battery set up about a mile from where we was. And they shot at it and hit it. Something woke me up. I didn't know what it was. I had earplugs in my ears because there had so many snorers in the tent where I could rest. What that was that woke me up was that Scud blowing up. But you know how if you're in a real deep sleep, something like that's brief. I was just aroused, but I went right back to sleep, and I found out the next day that there was a Scud that shot down, and the debris was about 1,000 miles or 1,000 meters south of where we were, you know, where the debris trail fell.
What does that alarm sound like?
Oh, one there in The Haran was just a loudspeaker. There'd be a siren, and then it was just a repeated message, scud alert, you know what they'd say. And then out there, we didn't really have any way of alarm other than landline. You know, the battalion would call us if they were notified.
Had the Air War started at this time?
Oh yeah, it'd been going on since, see, the Air War started, what was it, January 17th, somewhere along in there.
What do you think when the Air War started? What were your thoughts then?
We were sitting in the mess hall there at Fort Sill. We were in I believe the 4,000 area right across from the airport. We were sitting in there eating when they announced it on the radio, and we thought, well, here it started, you know, we knew it was. And we just hoped that it'd be successful, because we knew that would save a lot of lives.
So you're at Hoffer-All-Bottom, and how long did you stay there?
Well, Hoffer-All-Bottom, we just went right on through.
Okay.
We went 23 miles east, 23 miles west of Hoffer-All-Bottom to MSR Blue, and then we went about a half a mile north MSR Blue, and we just kind of cut a trail in the sand and picked out a spot and set up. We were about a quarter of a mile from our battalion, and none of the units were close together. You know, our whole battalion was kind of scattered over that area, about probably 2 or 3 miles.
Now you went up Tapline Road. Describe Tapline Road.
It is a 2-lane road. It had a big old, well, I forget how big that oil line was. I've got some pictures of it, but an oil line that sat on the south side of the road. I don't think that road could have been much more than maybe 22 foot wide. It wasn't real wide. A deuce and a half and fill up one side of it. You had to really be careful when you were driving, or to keep the thing on the road. You had to really watch.
Tapline Road goes where?
It eventually ends up, from what I can gather, that Tapline Road just follows that pipeline all the way over into Jordan. It goes from the port of Daman all the way across Saudi Arabia and across the border. That pipeline goes, I asked somebody about that not long ago, and I was told that it went into Jordan, which doesn't really make much sense in a way, because they don't get along too well. But
describe the Arabian countryside there.
it was just flat, gently undulating, bald prairies, what I'd call it. No grass, no vegetation. There were probably, you could see for probably 15 miles all the way around you. There were probably about maybe a half a dozen thorn bushes, maybe 3 or 4 foot high. Other than that, there wasn't anything, nothing. No grass, just barren. I've never seen land like that.
So you're stopped just off MSR Blue, and how long were you there?
We were there for 3 months at that location. We set camp up there, and we did a mission there for 3 months. And they moved us to King Khalid. In fact, the day we got notified today, I'll never will forget it, was Mother's Day in '91. Because we worked hard that week. We were setting out, me and two or three friends of mine were setting out near the CP. We had a camouflage net setting up there Sunday. We was going to kick back and just have a nice day. Sunday was usually a day off. We was playing dominoes. And here comes these 17 trucks rolling up the road, flatbeds. And one of them drove up to our main gate, told us that we're here to move you guys today. And that's how we were notified we were going to move, and that's what happened.
When did this happen? What time period?
This was Mother's Day when this occurred. The Mother's Day of and then in May, whatever day Mother's Day was in May in 91.
Okay. The day the ground war started. What did you do?
The day the ground war started, we were there about 3 days. The advance party was there about 3 days prior to when the ground war started. The main body hadn't gotten there. We set up camp. We did kind of fix us an improvised bunker to where, you know, maybe we could provide some protection. We didn't really worry much. You don't really think much about it. There's so much work going on. They did tell us, though, the night before it started, Tan sent somebody over, called everybody around. And there was tanks. You know, at this time there was, well, they were Syrian tanks is what they were, going up MSR Blue, just, you know, just right out here from us. They come over and told us that when the attack was going to start, that it was top secret. You know, who were we going to tell? You know, we were out in the middle of nowhere. They did tell us that. We didn't really figure there was much we could, there wasn't really much to worry about, so we just did our thing. And
Now, what were your duties at this time during the Iraq War?
during the, we weren't really mission capable during the ground war because we didn't have all the people up at that time. It took us about right at 3 days to set camp up, you know, which is a pretty good sized task for a, you know, a semi-mobile unit. You know, you're starting from scratch. You're not just setting tents up, you're establishing some permanence, you know, so we set up shower facilities and latrine facilities and this type of thing. Got everything lit up, you know, where all the tents had lights in them. Went out and went to our supply point, grew rations for the company, got the kitchen set up. There's a multitude of tasks to perform, but, you know, we were plenty busy just doing that.
Did you go to the Burn?
No, I never did.
Never Kuwait?
Never did.
Okay.
Had an opportunity. This was after the ground war was over. It was an elective type of opportunity. It was already hot. I'd had to ride up the back of the Deuce and a Half, and I didn't care for that personally. There's a lot of guys that'd been, and I didn't care about seeing destruction. I was not interested in that. You know, I just didn't have any interest in it. You know, all hostilities were ceased. To me, it was kind of pointless to. I didn't see the sense of going and seeing a bunch of tore up equipment. That's what I'm trying to say.
When you heard Saddam had blown the oil fields, what?
I didn't really realize or really fathom what it'd do to the environment. The first time I noticed it, though, we got up one morning. We'd had some rains that blew in from the from the northwest, and we'd had some sandstorms. I got up one morning and there was a cloud bank, I thought, all the way around us. I thought, what's going on here? That's what that was soot in the air. It was like being in a fishbowl and looking out. It came up about a third of the way on the horizon into the sky, right at it. But it was kind of like looking out a fishbowl, and then we realized that that's what that was soot in the air from those fires.
What did you think when you heard that we stopped going to Baghdad? We weren't going to get Saddam. What did you think?
Well, I think everybody thought that that's something you think about. There's not really an easy thought process in something like that. You got to trust what your commander-in-chief wants. At first, my first impulse was that we should have went to Baghdad. After second thought, that means occupational forces, taking care of an entire country, the burden that it would put on our country, because we'd had to pay for it, you know, if we'd have took it. After the problem with the Iraqis attacking their countrymen occurred, you know, killing the Kurds, you know, to me they should have went ahead and done it. You know, there's a lot of innocent people killed that shouldn't have been. But I've always been kind of felt kind of bad about that personally. I thought that really ruined the whole thing to me. 'Cause those people weren't bothering anybody.
So from your camp up north, where'd you go?
Our camp up north, we went to King Khalid Military Center, which was about 50 miles south, almost due south. We set up camp there. We were in the field about another month. And so many people had went home. I mean, the place was crawling with troops when we got there. There was 50,000 people when we got there. And finally, when all of them, when 7th Corps left, we got the availability of the building. We was able to move in the building for the last 2 months we were there. Get out of the, this right before it heated up again. You know, before it got hot, they got us into some buildings where we could live there.
Do you have any contact with the Arabians at King Khalid City?
Yes. Some of them spoke English. That's where I had most of my contacts with the local people. That and some of the outlying towns. I talked to some around Hoffer Bottom, but the soldiers at King Khalid were, most of them gracious. You know, the ones that could speak English would ask you to have tea with them. You know, they were being hospitable. You know, and we did. You know, there was Brandon, a good friend of mine, and myself. We had tea. You know, what they do is they throw out a rug, or I don't know what you call it, and they set up her teapot and a coffee pot. And we were walking by one night, and this fellow motioned us over to come sit down. He couldn't speak much English, but we knew what he wanted us to do, so we sat down there with him. Again, they're gracious people. You know, I never run into not a single one who's rude. That's rare.
So from King Khalid, where'd you go?
From King Khalid, that's when we went home. See, we left King Khalid on August. What was the date? I don't remember that day. We left King Khalid on about August the 6th, I believe it was. And we went back to, one thing about that, we were, when our mission was completed, we left all of our equipment there because we were working on the pre-positioned equipment. They was going to go to Kuwait, and they needed our stuff, so we left it there. We went back to Khobar Towers, to Daharan, and we were there 3 days before we flew out of the country and come home.
When you arrived in the U.S., what was your reaction?
Joy. To me it was. We landed in Bangor, Maine is where we landed at. It was a great feeling to be back in the United States. To touch U.S. soil.
And you got home when?
Talking about being released, or that was
when I say Saddam Hussein, what do you think?
tyrant. Somebody that should have been done away with.
Norman Schwarzkopf.
Great leader.
Kuwait.
Peace restored is the first thing that comes to my mind for Kuwait, personally.
Arabia.
Wouldn't want to visit there again, but the country's not much to look at, but gracious people.
Would you do it again?
If I had to, yeah.
What are your overall thoughts on Desert Storm?
That it was, well, in fact it was, and it'll be proven in history to be the greatest projected power that has ever been used. I mean, it was awesome. When you started seeing all these things pulling back, going to the front and coming back, and all the support elements, it was unbelievable what our country can do when it wants to.
Well, Paul, I think we got to get out of here.
Yeah.
So, Paul, I want to thank you.